Welcome. My name is David Howard, and today I'm speaking with Matt Stein, Global Content Manager for Cisco Customer Conferences. The Global Content team creates the content strategy for Cisco Live, Cisco Systems' flagship customer conference that typically delivers over 700 sessions, 12 keynotes, and over 100 hands-on labs. I'm speaking with Matthew today on the art and science of second screen. Thanks for speaking with me today, Matthew.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
Now, can you paint a broad brush picture of what's happening with second screen? We're hearing a lot about second screen in many different contexts these days.
So second screen probably has a couple different definitions. And if we look at it from our perspective for events, it's really about how do we bring more interaction to an audience. I mean, traditionally, if you go back 5, 6 years, audiences watched the presentation on the screen. They took notes on a pad and paper or perhaps on a laptop or mobile device, but it was very unidirectional. It was presenter to audience. What we're really looking at is this concept of how do we engage the audience in a more interactive way. So we look at things such as having an audience take notes or being able to ask questions to a panel of experts or even actually watch the presentation on their screen. So if they don't have the best seat in the house, they can actually still see the fairly complex slides and, more importantly, be able to move through the slides at their own pace. So all of these as different capabilities could all fall into the category of second screen, any one of which is enough to begin that journey of interaction with the audience.
So, and I'm thinking you talked about reaching everybody in the room. I'm thinking a company like Cisco, some of these conferences are got to be pretty big rooms. You've got some people at the back of the hall who are quite some distance from the stage.
That's correct. I mean, we have our average classroom size is around 200 individuals. Some of our largest classes have anywhere from 600 plus in the room. And then, of course, you can imagine keynotes where you have in the thousands, upwards of 8,000 or 9,000 in the room. And the idea here is, and if you think of this, no different than a sports stadium, no different than other major arenas, the idea here is you want to make sure there's not a bad seat in the house. And you want to make sure people feel engaged. And it's interesting, when you walk into rooms today of almost any corporate meeting, but of course focusing today on events, people are on their mobile devices. The problem is they're looking at email, Facebook, Twitter, any other social network that they have going, and they may not be fully paying attention. Sometimes that's actually our fault. When a speaker uses a term that people don't necessarily understand, we are in this generation now where we want to know what that term means, and so we'll look it up. Mm-hmm. And what that normally means without second screen is I go to a general web browser, I search for that term, that acronym, I look at the search results, I try to read one, and then hopefully I get the answer, and then I check back in. The whole concept behind second screen is don't let them leave your environment. Provide them the support, the answers, the things they're already looking for inside the same environment that they're already sitting in, and thus being able to ask questions, thus being able to take notes, all those things inside the environment that you're carefully crafting so that while people have a bit of attention shifting, if you will, it stays relatively focused inside the content of that session. So that's really what we look at when we think about second screen. It's about capturing and keeping the behavior that we know is already happening. We know people already have a little bit of that ADD when they want to be doing other things. Let's keep that activity and behavior inside the environment.
So it's almost like the mobile phone, the tablet that people bring, it's almost like it's a distraction from the event, and you're trying to pull them back into the event and change that from being a distraction.
Exactly. And, see that as an evolution, because initially it was seen as a distraction, and now we're seeing that as a far better engagement mechanism than almost, and again, the speaker is always the best, but it is a very close second. And think about this for those who have kids, a child who just listens to a lecture, how much will they actually acquire of that information as compared to when they get hands-on, when they interact with whatever the subject matter is? That's where learning takes place. And the goal of every event is education and followed by action. and again, it doesn't matter if it's a sales conference, an educational conference, a loyalty conference. At the end of the day, you're still trying to get people to learn something and then take an action, whatever that action is. Mm-hmm. And so by allowing people to engage and engage more senses, and so first of all, just watching a lecture is just visual and audio, but now engaging the tactile senses to ask good questions on a mobile device. You are engaging with that content. And believe it or not, that truly does help the learning, the neurological aspects of education by engaging more senses, by forcing them to ask a question, read an answer. You are utilizing more aspects of the brain, and thus hopefully we are actually having a far better benefit to this session. And so what was, as you mentioned, David, initially a distraction, the phone, the tablet, et cetera. In fact, I remember training classes years ago talking about if people are looking at their phone, you're not doing a good job. That means they're bored.
Yep.
Because now we're taking that and saying that phone is my most powerful weapon, that if I can be compelling enough that they want to take notes, they want to ask questions, that only increases their education and their awareness, et cetera. And then, of course, the likelihood of them taking action. So we really see this as extremely powerful events.
So it sounds like Cisco is being pretty aggressive at taking advantage of this technology.
We've been looking at this and working on this for a couple of years now. Last year in the United States, we deployed a first wave of this. And again, a recommendation to everyone, you never want to deploy technology for technology's sake. You really need to look at your audience. You need to look at your event, and you need to understand what is the most appropriate utilization, what is the most appropriate behavior and business processes that works for your event, for your audience, and for your own speakers. So last year we took a first brush at this. And what we did is we deployed just the ability to ask questions online. And so in every session we had a panel of experts who were available and watching for questions coming in. And we allowed attendees to ask questions. Again, very limited, but it was both a training for our attendees, but also, frankly, for our speakers who are not used to the same behavior. They've been speaking for 20 years in a traditional manner. And so this was an education on both sides. We were extremely pleased with the results. We saw over 2,600 questions asked and answered over the course of just a couple of days during our pilot. So really we saw this as there's an appetite and there's a desire for that. Now what we're rolling out in London in our European event, in Milan, is something that's a little bit more expansive. It's not only that Q&A, but of course also how to take notes. And interestingly enough, what we're doing is actually allowing people to take notes on the actual slides that they're viewing. So when they download those slides from the presentation, their notes are actually built into the slides. So really, again, it's all about making this a reference for them to make those notes useful and relevant in the future. And we're also allowing our attendees to actually see the slides on their mobile device. So again, there's not a bad seat in the house. As we talked about before, we really want to make sure that no matter how busy or how crowded the room is, people really can still see those slides and actually at their own pace. You know, they can go backwards. If the speaker went too fast for them, they're still taking notes. They're still looking at. They can go backwards. So again, you see this slow evolution. We're not trying to revolutionize everything overnight because we know that while the technology is capable, and like most things in life, the technology is sometimes further along than behavior and business processes. And we really want to make sure all three of those are aligned each step of the way.
So the recap, you say no technology for technology's sake. There's got to be a real educational or business purpose behind deploying of the technology. And it sounds like advice for other companies would be evolutionary, not revolutionary. Don't try to do too much at once. Any other advice for companies that are dipping their toes in the water, stepping into this technology, figuring out how to use it?
I think the key here is to really take this step back and say, what is the goal of my session? So I have seen sessions that are all about just celebration, a sales conference, for instance. I've seen other events, and ours is in this realm, where it's really about education, teaching people how to use technology, the Cisco products, et cetera. And then there's others that are really sales conferences. And at the end of the day, we want you to call this gentleman right here, who's our sales leader, and please call him with your credit card. And so the key here is technology needs to fit the requirements or the goals of that session. And so, for instance, if you're in a loyalty program, a sales meeting, for instance, probably a little less relevant to be taking notes, et cetera, because in that case, it's really about celebration. And so it's a little bit of a different purpose. But when you look at most events, they really are around education and awareness. And that's where you need to identify what is the appropriate tools that we want for that experience and for those goals. And so really it should be driven by the business. What am I hoping to accomplish? And then only after that, it's cool. What are the technologies to do that? Because there's a ton of them out there. And then the reason for that is because you're going to need to go to your stakeholders. For myself, we have over 900 speakers. I had to convince 900 speakers to include a question manager and a panel of experts for every one of their sessions. It took a lot of convincing. These are some of our top speakers. They were nervous that somebody here is going to be in the room and being seen as an expert more than them. They were nervous that people are going to not be paying attention to them. They're going to be paying attention to their mobile devices. There were lots of fears. And so as long as you have a business requirement and you can explain that to them, that can help allay many of their fears. And then from there, you build off of that and you build their trust. So that's why it's always good to have that level of what is the business trying to drive, and then explain why we're bringing in technology. Because otherwise, to some, it might feel like change for change's sake, and that's really not what this is all about.
Mm-hmm. Now, the hard question always is budget. What do people need to think about in terms of hard dollar costs and personnel resources?
So two sides to that. First, the personnel side, and that is not to be underthought. A lot of times we think purely in terms of our monetary budget. Having the personnel cost is actually not minimal. In our case, last year, we doubled the number of people in every room. Right? You have a speaker, and we had at least one person answering questions in every single room. Now, thankfully, we were able to put in policies in place, and we have enough people at our conference where we were able to take another speaker and have them support that session. So in essence, you're taking an off-duty speaker and having them support a speaker that's presenting. So we weren't needing to add more people. But in general, you will add some overhead in terms of training and support and all the other aspects to making this a reality. On the other hand, by always going back to the business benefits, you should be able to quantify those business benefits to overcome challenges with personnel and budget. And so for budget, I think you'd see that in any conference, technology is starting to play a larger role, be it location tracking, be it mobile apps in general, be it former barcode scanners and now active RFID or iBeacon from Apple. This need for technology to make a conference more user-friendly and frankly more interesting each year, this is just part of that. And when you think about it, we look at a lot of technology at registration. We look at a lot of technology in terms of navigation between buildings. This is an extension of that. This is technology inside the classroom, inside the meeting room. And when you consider how much time people spend in there, that should help you prioritize where that goes in your technology budget, because every event has a technology budget. If nothing else, to provide basic internet connectivity for your attendees. So there is a technology budget. I think for most companies, when you look at how much time people spend in a classroom, it starts to become fairly intuitive in terms of how much of your budget you should apply, because this is a place where people will spend 8, 10, 12 hours over the course of the event. And the wonderful thing is it's a place where people are spending time without a whole lot of interruption. When you think about the trade show floor, there's lots of distractions. In a classroom, I have their attention. That's very, very powerful. So the ways I can invest in that place is worth its weight in gold in many cases.
Well, this is very exciting stuff. I wish I had a lot more time because I'm sure you could tell us a lot more. But very quickly, do you have any final closing thoughts that people need to take away from our conversation?
I've never been known for quick, but I'll try. Final thoughts is just don't be afraid of trying new things. It's one of those things that you would be amazed by how quickly our audience, our attendees, and frankly even our speakers, are willing to try new things. And while they profess fear, look at the apps that are available today in general for just social media. You look at what people do on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and other aspects at every event. People want to engage. People don't want to be passive anymore. So let's not hold them back. Let's open the doors and say, and just as most events have in social media a couple of years ago, where we started to embrace the concept of Twitter and Facebook and really encourage people to be social, let's take that one step further and say, let's not be scared of people engaging during a keynote or during breakouts. Let's encourage that. We think this is a good thing for people to actively engage while learning and listening. So I would say that sometimes we are a little bit more reticent than our attendees. Let's give them the capabilities, and I think they'll surprise us.
Sounds good. Matthew, I thank you for speaking with me today. I really appreciate it. I think you have a lot to share about this topic, and I think people are going to find a lot of value in what you've shared with us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks, David, for the opportunity.
Thank you.